Most Wanted is the young adult novel tie-in to the Solo movie, and it's Rae Carson's third dive into writing for Star Wars, following the red one in From a Certain Point of View and Hear Nothing, See Nothing, Say Nothing in Canto Bight. And I have to say, while most of the book is quite enjoyable, there's a certain point in the book where there's a plot hole so big I found it to be unforgivable and ruined the book for me. For the most part, I did enjoy Most Wanted. It follows Han and Qi'ra as they each embark on a mission that turns out to be two sides of the same coin, and everything ends up going south. As emissaries for the White Worms, the name of Lady Proxima's gang, they're present in two separate places for an auction for a very valuable data cube. They lose the bid, the droid Gotra win, and the Koldana Syndicate shoots both places up. The story follows them in their attempt to survive and work out what they should do next. They eventually end up asking for help from their friend, Tsulo, a Rodian who's also in the White Worm gang, and he ends up being sucked along for the ride. As fun as the book was, it felt really half-arsed, like Rae Carson couldn't be bothered to make up decent explanations for things or didn't care if the characters were doing things that actually made sense considering who they are and what they were doing. At one point they needed to protect the data cube from getting wet when they were trying to escape the sewers and end up having to swim. They can't get the data cube wet though, because if it gets wet it will short out, and if that happens it's worthless because all the data on the cube will be lost. So they need to keep it dry at all costs. They then decide the driest place they can put it is in someone's mouth. I swear to God I'm not making this up, and this is exactly what I meant when I said Carson wrote stuff with no consideration for if it made sense or not. It's like she had the idea of someone keeping something safe in their mouth before she had a situation that required it, and then forced it in any way she could. Han, Qi'ra and Tsulo live in the sewers. The fucking sewers. Surely one of them had a waterproof pouch or something. This isn't even the worst offender though, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is the second book in the new canon where something happens in it that I found to be truly breaking. I finished the story, but after the story breaking moments happened, I finished it purely so I could write a review and honestly say yes, I've read it in its entirety. In order to prove their worth to Lady Proxima and the Engineer, the creator and seller of the data cube, and stay alive, Han, Qi'ra and Tsulo set up the White Worms to broker a deal worth 1 billion credits between the Engineer and the rest of the parties that wanted to buy the data cube. They offer to do this for the Engineer if she pays Lady Proxima 0.5% of the total sale price. Han quickly does the maths and correctly comes to the conclusion that Lady Proxima would receive 5 million credits. 0.5%. I get that Qi'ra's a sewer rat and isn't used to the business side of things, but she's presented as being the smart one in the group and as someone who's always able to elevate herself to the situation at hand and seem like she fits there. 0.5%. Who the fuck hasn't heard of 10%? That's not even the issue, it's just something stupid. The truly stupid thing is when the Engineer asks what the three of them want in exchange for setting this up with the White Worms, they all ask, I repeat, ask, to be dropped back off so they can live in the fucking sewers of Corellia with the fucking White Worms again. I'm sorry, what? What? They negotiated a deal worth 1 billion credits with 5 million credits going to the White Worms and couldn't negotiate the same amount for themselves or take a cut of the White Worms' money? Even if they only walked away with 1 million between them, that's still 333,000 credits each, more than enough to buy a brand new ship each and start a business. Why the hell didn't they do that? Qi'ra's the smartest one, so she should have realised. Han's the one who dreams of being a pilot, so he should have thought of it. And Tsulo is an engineer, which means he's good with numbers, so he should have thought of it. Even if none of them thought of buying a ship to start a business, when you broker a deal for 1 billion credits and someone else walks away with 5 million, you ask for your share, you don't ask to live in the fucking sewers. Do you know what makes this plot point so fucking offensive? It's that everyone knew it made no sense. Rae Carson knew when she was writing it that she'd written her characters into a situation that needed to be resolved, but could only be resolved by them going back to Corellia, because guess what? Most Wanted is set before the Solo movie, and we know Han and Qi'ra are still with the White Worms at the beginning of the film, so they can't escape in Most Wanted. They still have to be in the situation they were in at the beginning of the book, because that's the same situation they were in at the beginning of the Solo movie. So did she trace the story back and try to find a way to get them to never leave Corellia or never get the opportunity to have the money in the first place? No, she just wrote the characters so that they asked to be sent back to living in the fucking sewers and eating rats, which makes absolutely no sense. Half of the book was about the characters realising that there's a better life out there and that they're all aiming for it, especially now that they've had a taste of it. But because Rae Carson backed them into a wall and couldn't think of a way out, her best solution was to make the characters ask for something that goes against the core of their very being and goes against the tide of the entire book she wrote. I'm so angry that she did this and that Disney allowed this to happen. People think I'm too harsh on Pablo Hidalgo, but this is exactly the kind of fucking bullshit I'm talking about. Han, who dreams of leaving the planet and flying among the stars, has the option to fund that, and instead of making it happen, he asks to be taken back to the fucking sewers. He didn't even say Corellia or just take me back to where I was. He actually said he wanted to go back to the sewers. What the fuck is this shit? How has this been allowed to go to print like this? How did nobody read this before it went to print and say, this makes no sense, it needs to be rewritten? And then there's the droid Gotra. Disney really needs to shit or get off the pot with this one. How long have they been going on with the Gotra? They were first mentioned in the Tarkin novel by James Luceno 5 years ago, and nobody has actually done anything with them yet. Sure, they were in Solo as a side story for L3, and I didn't think that Fyzen Gore's group in Last Shot counted as the Gotra, but people seem to think they do, so I can accept that. But there's still been no war, no climax, no story that really shows the Gotra actually doing anything. They're always just this vague threat in the background that nobody ever seems to want to actually use, and to be honest, I'm tired of hearing about them. I honestly don't see the point in these so-called young adult novels. As far as I know, in the old canon, the only young adult novels were the Young Jedi Knight books, and they weren't very good. They were okay for filling in a bit of timeline for Jacen, Jaina and Anakin, but that's about it. I see no reason for young adults to be reading books of this calibre, because the fact is the writing in 90% of the young adult novels released by Disney so far has been juvenile. I was 10 when I read the Thrawn trilogy. 10. And you know what? I understood it just fine. Then I moved on to the Jedi Academy trilogy, and guess what? I understood that just fine too. The Courtship of Princess Leia, I, Jedi, Shadows of the Empire, The New Rebellion, the list goes on, and not once did I fail to understand the story or the prose. Now I understand that not all people read at the same level, but it's become clear to me over the 2 years I've spent catching up with the new canon that what Disney calls a young adult novel is what I call a children's book. The other thing that's become apparent to me in that time is that, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 books, every single story, whether it's a young adult novel or an adult novel, is linear. Catalyst and Thrawn Alliances are the only 2 books I can think of that actually require the reader to be able to follow the characters moving through both time and space in large amounts, and the only books that had events in them that directly affected the future of the same book. Every other book Disney has released seems to go like this. Step 1. Character X is in trouble, so they have to go somewhere, or Character X is ordered to go somewhere. Step 2. Once there, Character X gets in trouble and has to go somewhere else, and or is told to go somewhere else. Step 3. Character X repeats step 2 until the author reaches 300 pages. With a couple of exceptions, the Disney Star Wars books are nothing more than novelised fetch quests. That's it. Why Disney feels the need to dumb down something that's already a simple A to B to C story like that even further into the young adult novel class or the child's novel class is absolutely beyond me, and it discredits how potentially good Star Wars novels can be when told right, and how intelligent the readers actually are. I'm really getting tired of reading these books that have no real depth to them. Sure, they can have cool moments and even good characters and character development, and Most Wanted is one of them, but it seems like almost none of the authors in the new canon know how to craft an intricate story that requires some actual thinking to understand, and unfortunately, Most Wanted is one of them. My plan was to catch up with the new canon before I went back to Legends, which is why so far I mostly only have the new material on my channel, but I'm so tired of reading these linear books that I may actually start doing Legends at the same time, because to be honest, I'm really getting bored with the new canon, the books at least. She also spelled brunette wrong, but that's nothing compared to the rest of the issues. So overall, Most Wanted isn't worth reading, and to be honest, I'm honestly thinking this might be the worst book in the new canon, even worse than Heir to the Jedi. Heir to the Jedi had lots of issues, and for me the biggest one was the way Luke had to connect to the Force, but at least Luke's character and what drove him was true to the movies, and nothing in that book compares to the complete unexplained reversal of motives the characters show in Most Wanted. It's fine up to a point, then so incredibly jarring. I'm really disappointed because after reading Rae Carson's short story in From a Certain Point of View and her novella in Canto Bight, I was cautiously optimistic about Most Wanted. Sadly, my optimism was repaid with lazy writing that clearly wasn't read by a single person before it went to print, and all for the sake of Disney making sales because there was a new movie out at the time, so they had to have a book to go with it, regardless of the quality. I'm genuinely sad to see Star Wars books being released of this quality. Disney is no longer content with running Star Wars to the ground with just their feminist bullshit. Now they're doing it with the actual quality of the writing in the books, and it's such a shame. Perhaps instead of hiring new female authors because they want to push Star Wars with a feminist agenda, Disney should focus on getting good authors regardless of sex. They won't though. They know who the good Star Wars authors are, and with the exception of Zahn and Lucino, who are practically money printing machines when it comes to Star Wars books, rather than look at the authors from the expanded universe, Disney would prefer to hire feminists to write books, with no regard for the quality of those books. Sadly, Most Wanted is an excellent example of what happens when you hire someone because of their political ideology rather than their writing ability. At the time of me recording this, I finally caught up with the new canon in terms of books, and I've read every adult and young adult novel released since Disney rebooted the canon, and I have to say, I'm not impressed. If you compare the first 5 years of Disney books to the first 5 years of the Bantam books, the difference is night and day. In the same 5-year span for Legends, we had the Thrawn trilogy, the Dark Empire trilogy, the Jedi Academy trilogy, the Courtship of Princess Leia, the Truce at Bakura, the Corellian trilogy, the New Rebellion, the Black Fleet Crisis trilogy, Shadows of the Empire, the Tales books, most of the Callista trilogy, and the X-Wing series of novels had started. All of those books interlinked and connected to each other somehow and worked together to build a massive galaxy full of interesting characters and stories, and most importantly of all, they focused on the heroes of the original trilogy. The Thrawn trilogy set the tone of the books for the Bantam era, the Jedi Academy trilogy directly affected every single book that was set after it, and Shadows of the Empire fits perfectly between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi without retconning a single thing. Something Disney has done so many times I can't keep track of it anymore. Sadly, Disney is incapable of treating the franchise with the same kind of respect, and for some reason doesn't want fans to like the original trilogy anymore, and it doesn't want fans to like its heroes either. It's the only explanation I can think of for why we barely ever get a book with them in. But if you just compare the sense of adventure, fun and world building that you had in those books between 1991 and 1996, and the quality of the books overall to what we've got from Disney in its first 5 years, it's just nowhere near as good or deep. Disney just doesn't care, and between their announcement that they'll let EA keep the Star Wars license because even though the new Battlefront games are shit, but they still make money, and reading Most Wanted, it was the final piece of evidence I needed to reach that conclusion. The only book I have to read now is Queen's Shadow, and for some reason the hardcover has been restricted from sale in the UK, so I'll have to import the hardcover or buy the paperback, which is absolute fucking bullshit. As a fan, I deserve more than that. This is bullshit, pure and simple, but I'll talk about it when I review Queen's Shadow. As for Most Wanted, skip it, it's complete fucking shit.